Okay, here we go. We have Raymond Santana and Yusef Salaam of the Central Park 5.
What's up?
What's happening? Yes, sir.
Definitely an honor to have you guys, man. Such an incredible story that you guys have gone through. And, I just recently watched the documentary that Ken Burns put together, to really just get a better picture about what happened. And, just want to give my apologies to everything that you guys have gone through because it's really a horrific set of events.
Yeah,
I appreciate
thank you.
that.
Appreciate that, man. Definitely.
So let's go ahead and just talk about the story from the very beginning to where we are right now. So you guys were essentially teenagers, like 14, 15 years old at the time?
Yep.
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, and you guys were living in the Bronx?
No, Yusef lived in Schaumburg, and I lived on the east side of Harlem.
Yeah.
I lived in Spanish
okay.
Harlem at the time.
Now, at the time, and this is the 80s, I guess?
Yeah, 89, 1989.
Right, late 80s. The New York that you see today with, Times Square being a big tourist attraction and everything is relatively safe and so forth. This was not the New York back then.
No, definitely wasn't.
Not at all.
Times Square back then had, peep shows, a bunch of them,
Sure, it looked like Vegas.
Yeah, yeah, definitely different.
Right. And you guys were kids. I mean, before this incident, did you guys get into any trouble or were you relatively good kids?
No, we came from good homes, middle class, families. We had no dealings with the law. This was our first time.
Yeah, that's all of us.
Yeah.
This was like a brand new kind of experience in terms of, I always say too that I always felt like the cops were your friends. I thought that those were folks that, you would see them in the streets, you could say hi to them, you could go to them and tell them what's going on and be safe. And I mean, we look at us as in terms of the inception of what happened to us in our lives. And then we fast forward to today and it's like, man, no way, no how. And now we're having children and we're scared for for them to be interacting with officers the way they're interacting because, now some of them are our age in terms of when we were going through our situation, Yeah.
I mean, and at the time, New York was really dealing with a crime problem.
Yeah.
There was the subway vigilante
Yeah.
that would essentially, shot a couple people that attempted to rob him.
Yeah.
I remember there was the, what's it called? The Guardian Angels?
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, and these guys would essentially ride on the train to protect the passengers against the gangs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there was already sort of a feeling in New York of kind of danger and sort of an unsafe kind of environment.
Mm-hmm. That's true, but that's also like the whole slippery slope kind of thing when you think about the fact that, they wanted to be more tough on crime, but then they basically took a paintbrush and painted everybody of color with the same paintbrush and said, well, nah, all of these people are susceptible and capable of doing this kind of thing, when that wasn't the case,
Yeah.
Right. Now, the night of the incident, were you guys in Central Park at the time?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
What happened was that I lived on the east side of Harlem, and next to that complex was a housing, was a project called Taft Projects. And so I went over there to hang out with some dudes, and that night in Schaumburg, they was having a party. So we went over there to visit the party. Now, I didn't know Yusef, I didn't know Kevin, I didn't know Corey, I didn't know Antoine. But how we wound up all together was through mutual friends. Some people in my group knew some of the people in his group. And so we went over there to go to a party, and the Schaumburg boys was all in front of the housing complex, and that's how we all got together.
Yeah.
Okay. So after the party, how did you guys end up in Central Park?
Oh, no, we didn't even go to the party. We got to the housing complex. We got to Schaumburg, and we was in front of Schaumburg, just standing around, some of the guys just talking. And then somebody was like, yo, we going in the park. But for the Schaumburg boys, that was their backyard.
Yeah.
They was there all the time. So it was nothing to go on 110th Street and just hang out. And so, me being 14 at the time, I just followed the crowd.
Okay. So a group of you go to Central Park. Like, how many people was it?
Oh, it was a lot. It was close to 30. It was a bunch of kids.
I always thought it was more than that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it could've been more than that.
in terms of just the way that the visuals looked, to me it almost looked like 50 people. I was all the way in the back of the crowd because I had a limp. I was walking, I had injured my leg, and they were all already walking into the park and stuff like that. And it's crazy because, like, you know, even when we think about those times back then, it wasn't something that was abnormal. This was something, you know, especially for me, like Raymond is saying, me living in Schaumburg Plaza, right across the street from Central Park, that was the norm. We would always go into Central Park. I would go in there and ride my skateboard. I would go in there and climb trees. You know, we would go in there and walk around the lake. Back then, it was a disgusting lake when you think about it. You know, smelled real bad. But for us as young people, we thought we was doing something romantic. If we walking around the lake holding hands with a young girl, you know, that was the extent of our, you know, our ventures into things that we shouldn't have known anything about, you know.
Right. So you have a group of roughly 50 Black and Spanish kids hanging out.
Yeah.
Now, does anything happen that night? Because I had heard some stories about an incident, someone got beat up and so forth. Talk about that.
Well, nah, so, you know, I mean, I was in the back, but from what I saw, it didn't start off where anything major happened. People were kind of horsing around and, you know, it was, to me, it was like young people being young people. And, you know, some car, we kind of made our way to the main traverse where the cars travel around. And I remember people like throwing rocks at the cars, and even that stuff, that, you know, you think about it now, like, man, so we're riding pretty nice cars. Somebody throw a rock at our car, we're gonna be pretty upset, you know?
Yeah.
But back then it was like, you throwing a rock at a car, that wasn't something that was abnormal or strange,
Yeah.
you know, in terms of the depth of our understanding of what we were actually doing.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, when I say we, I'm not talking necessarily even about me, Raymond, Corey, Antron, or Kevin, you know, none of us, we actually didn't do anything. A lot of people didn't do anything, you know, in terms of some of the stuff that actually happened, you know. We were really innocent bystanders in terms of watching and being witnesses to what happened and, you know,
Yeah.
to really be able to tell the story all over again.
Yeah, and some things did happen, like a police car had came and they flashed the light on the group and everybody scattered, right? So everybody ran. So we was split. And after that, something did happen. Like, I didn't know about it because when I finally come back to the group, they was telling me about it. So, like, a couple of dudes who had got separated from the group, they did jump like an old man who was walking. They considered him a bum.
Oh, I saw that.
You know what I'm saying?
I saw that.
So, and these guys, they did cop out to those charges later on. They went to prison and served, you know, 1 year or 1.5 years in prison for that.
Yeah.
You know, and
Okay.
stuff like that. And like Yusef stated, we did go to the transverse and then we wound up going to the reservoir. And 2 people did get assaulted at the reservoir and one of them was badly, but that was by one person.
Yeah.
That wasn't by a group. You know, it was by one person who did it. And he went to jail for that. And he served a year in prison for that.
Okay. So you guys are part of this group, and certain members of the group are you know, doing things they shouldn't really be doing. They're, you know, throwing rocks at cars. Someone goes and beats somebody up and so forth. But you guys are not actually involved in any of that. You're just part of the whole crew.
Just part of the group, yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of that night, you guys just go home and that's it?
Well, some of us did. Like Corey left, like Corey, you know, in Corey's story, he leaves the park like
Almost like right after he went in.
right after he went in.
He was like, I'm out of
so
here.
So he was like, you know, it doesn't make no sense for me to hang out with these dudes. He went back home. So he didn't witness anything. You know, for me, I got arrested outside the park. You know, by the time that person had got arrested, assaulted by the reservoir, and they called the police, and the police came on the group, whatever was left of the group, because a lot of people had left at that time.
Yeah.
And so I wound up getting arrested along with a guy named Steven Lopez. You know, and then after that, Kevin got arrested with a guy named Lamont McCall, and another guy named Clarence Thomas.
Yeah.
You know, and so
Okay.
Yusef didn't get arrested till like 2 days later or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so you guys have this night. Various stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
You guys leave, and then the arrests happen afterwards.
Yeah.
But on that night,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a woman gets brutally beaten and raped.
Yes.
That's correct.
Yes, indeed.
Now, just to put it in kind of a context, things like this were already happening in Central Park. There was I guess a string of assaults and rapes already in Central
Yeah.
Park.
Yeah, the guy was known as the East Side Rapist.
Okay. So the East Side Rapist was running around Central Park and raping people, but people don't know who he is
Yeah.
at this point. Okay. So then a couple days after the incident, you guys start getting arrested.
Mm-hmm.
When they arrest you, what do they charge you with? Well, what do they tell you that you're getting arrested for?
Originally, for me, because I had arrested that night, it was misdemeanor charges. So it was like trespassing, menacing, riot. It was stuff that was supposed to go to family court. So originally, we was given disappearance tickets to appear in family court, and we had to wait for our parents to come pick us up. And it wasn't until they found a jogger in like those wee hours of the morning that they thought she was gonna die, because they saw the condition and the state that she was in. And so they called a Homicide North Detective Squad, who came in and said, all right, well, let us question the boys, those that you have in custody.
Yeah.
Okay. And she was brutally beaten and raped. I guess like her skull was fractured and so forth. I mean, I guess at one point they weren't even sure if she was going to live.
Yeah, exactly.
They didn't expect her to live at all.
They didn't expect her to live. That's why they called a homicide squad to come on in, because they thought she was going to die.
We got to remember too, from the reports that everybody knows about, this lady lost about 3/4 of her blood, and it was amazing in terms of that whole scenario as well, because then when they arrested us, even when they arrested those of us afterwards, them telling us, hey, we need y'all to get your clothes that y'all wore that night and things of that nature, none of us having a drop of blood on us, nobody's skin. I mean, she obviously put up a fight, but the way that they were trying to make the story sound, especially with Kevin Richardson, was that they tried to make the people believe that she had scratched him. But then when you tested the fingernails and did forensics and all of that stuff, nothing matched any one of us.
Yeah.
But they still pinned it on us, because, I always said that it was really more sexy for it to be 5, people of color brutalizing a young, probably wealthy investment banker at that time,
Right.
That's
who happens to be white, blonde, pretty.
Yeah.
So it made for some very compelling headlines.
Definitely.
Okay. So Raymond, let's go ahead and start with you.
Mm-hmm.
You get arrested. You get brought to the precinct.
Uh-huh.
At what point did they start questioning you about this?
Well, we was there until early in the morning. I think Kevin was the first one that they took into the room, and then I was second. And so you're talking like 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning. So by that time we was already there the whole night. And the line of questioning starts off very calm. It's like, just what happened that night? Tell us what happened. And so, I go through the story of who I was with, who I came with, what I saw that night, and that was it. And then it was like, but wait a minute, what about this woman? And I go, what woman? And they say, the woman who got raped. And I'm like, whoa, I don't know nothing about that. I never saw that. I don't know nothing about that. And that line of questioning goes on for hours. And then I had my grandmother there who was sitting with me at the time, and she spoke very little English, but she can't carry a conversation. She just knew a lot of curse words in English, right? And so they had to translate between me and her. And so I guess that became problematic for them. And so it was like, all right, we got to get her out the room. And that's when it starts. And by this time, you're under, 3-4 hours of questioning, of not knowing what's going to happen. The pressure's just so great. And it gets even greater as the questioning goes on, And so for me, they started to do the intimidation tactics, right? They had an officer come in, he'll knock at the door, he'll bring my grandmother out, and he'll talk to her in Spanish. And while they got her outside, that's when they started to work on me. So, they'll bring an officer in who's real tall, he gives me this look, threatens me, what the fuck are you looking at? At that point, I'm about 5'6", 120 pounds soaking wet. And it just builds from there. It builds from there until they get me to a point that I feel like I'm so helpless, And for me, that point came because with the officers coming in and out the room, it happened about 3 times. The third time is when the officer who's actually asking me the questions, where he just flips and he's like, I'm tired of this shit. He bangs on the table and he reaches for me. And at that point, I feel like I'm not going to make it out the precinct. I feel like I'm going to die, right? And at that same moment, a detective who comes in the room, sitting in the back, stops him. Starts yelling at him, cursing at him. What the fuck are you doing? You crazy? Get out the room. Kicks him out the room. And at that moment, I feel like he saved my life, right? And he sits there and he goes, Raymond, you a good kid. I know you ain't do this, but you got these guys in the other precincts and they saying you did it. I need your help.
Man.
And I'm like, so what the hell am I going to tell this dude? Because I don't know. I don't know the facts. I wasn't there. I didn't see shit. But what he does is he gives me a lifeline. He pulls out a picture of Kevin Richardson. He lays it on the table. And he says, you see this kid right here? Do you know him? I say, no. And he said, well, this is Kevin. You see the scratch on his face? That came from the jogger fighting him off. Now, we know he going to jail, but I don't want you to go to jail. So I need you to help me out. Give me something. And then he just sits back and he just looks at me and just waits.
Man.
And at that moment, as a 14-year-old kid, what are you doing? We're trying to figure out a lie to tell, something just to stop the pressure from overcoming. And that's how it
Okay.
goes.
I mean, this is classic good cop bad
Good
cop.
cop, bad
Wait,
cop.
wait. I want to just interject there because I knew that piece was going to come up in terms of the classic good cop, bad cop thing. But when you are in there and it's happening to you, TV can't paint that picture.
TV campaign.
So when we see stuff like that happen on TV, I usually tell folks that's about 50% of the reality of what really goes on. Like Raymond didn't think that the guy was faking. He thought the guy was about to kill him and come across that table.
Yeah.
But they probably scripted that stuff. Hey, listen, I'm gonna be the bad guy. You know what I'm saying? You make sure I don't go too far. You know what I'm saying? And for us, we scared to death.
Never been through it.
Okay. So at no point do you ask for a lawyer or anything else like that. I guess you just don't even know about stuff like that at that point.
I mean, they read the Miranda rights, but at that moment, you're just so afraid, and it's the fear of the unknown that it doesn't even compute for a 14-year-old kid. You know what I'm saying? Unless you have that experience and you've been through it before, you don't know nothing. You know what I'm saying? Or unless a parent is there to say, hold on, wait a minute, I think we need an attorney. But if it's just me and him, he can read the damn Declaration of Independence, and I'm just like, all right, whatever,
Oh, okay.
Man.
So at the end of all this questioning for you, Raymond, do you actually give them a story and admit to this crime that you didn't do?
Well, what happened was I didn't give him a story. All I said was, Kevin did it, because it's the only person I know who is telling me Kevin did it. And then he says, well, what did Kevin do? And I said, well, Kevin was struggling with the woman, right? So now he goes, okay, what did Antron McCray do? And I go, who the fuck is Antron? I don't even know who this dude is. But he's like, he's there. We know he did it. And I go, okay, so Antron was grabbing the lady's legs. And then he goes, what did Steven Lopez do? And I go, I don't know. But he says, this woman lost a lot of blood. We don't even know if she's going to make it. Something had to be used. She had all these injuries in her face and around her head. Something had to be used. A rock, a brick, a pipe. So now he's feeding me what he perceives is to be the facts. And that's options. Pick one. And I go, okay, a brick. And he says, well, who had the brick? I say, Steven Lopez. And he goes, okay. Now, I don't write nothing down. He writes everything down himself.
Right. And this isn't being videotaped.
At that point, no.
Yeah.
At that point, no. He's just writing it all down. And, when we get to my part, he says, okay, so what did you do? And I said, I ain't do nothing. I was just watching the shit. And he goes, well, that's not believable. If you're sitting there telling me a story, you got to make it more believable. You got to be in there somewhere. And so in my mind, a 14-year-old kid, I said, well, let me pick a let's roll, right? So I go, okay, well, I was there and I reached over and I grabbed the woman's breast. And he goes, okay, fine. He writes it down and he goes, all right, you did a great job. I signed the statement and then he goes, okay, I need you to do one more thing for me. And I go, what? He says, I'm going to send you to another precinct. You're going to tell another officer the same story and you'll be fine. You want to go home, right? You helping me, I'm going to help you. And that's how it goes.
Now, Yusef, what happened to you exactly?
Shoot. So they brought me in after all of that. They come to my house. Now, mind you, that night, I had on almost like a sky blue, I had on a sky blue jacket, sky blue pants, and I had a flat top, and I was about 6'3", 6'2", 6'3", since I was about 12 years old. So I was pretty visible. I was one of those guys that if I'm walking through the park, as tall as I was, you'd be like, yo, who's that? Tall guy with a flat top, So from what I understand, they kept saying there was this tall guy with a flat top with us. They do their investigation, start going to the surrounding neighborhoods. you know, any of y'all know about a tall guy with a flat top? Yeah, that sounds like that dude Kane, because that was my nickname back then. And so, long story short, they figure out where I live, figure out what my real name is, and they go up to my house to see if they can get me. In the meanwhile, I'm riding up and down the elevators missing them because I'm looking for them. Because when I came home from school that day, I bumped into Corey, and Corey said, yo, man, the cops are looking for you. I said, the cops are looking for me for what? And I asked Corey, I said, did you do something last night? Because I know I didn't do anything. He said, nah, man, I left almost right after I got in there. So I said, well, you know what? Let's go to the cops and let's tell them what we saw. And I'm going to be home before my mom gets back. Now, what's so crazy, and Raymond already knows, what's so crazy is that my name was on a sheet of paper of people that they were looking for as suspects. When I came around the corner to my apartment building after a few hours of us playing cat and mouse and not finding each other, they finally are in front of my door. They see me, they ask me, who am I? And I say, I'm Yusef Salaam. They look at the piece of paper and say, this is one of the guys we were looking for. They ask Corey who he is. He said, I'm Corey Wise. They look at the sheet of paper. They say, your name is not on the list, but you want to go downtown with your buddy? You'll be right back. Now, that's the craziest part about this story is that Corey spent 13 years in prison for this crime that he didn't commit.
Yeah.
Just because he said, all right, I'm going to go downtown with my boy, you know what I'm saying, just to make sure he all right. Not knowing that that was part of the tricks, you know.
Okay.
And so when they brought me down and brought us down into the precinct, Corey's 16, they already searched me in the hallway of my apartment building. They took my wallet, they took my keys, and they took, on my keys I had a little pocket knife, you know, with a jade bird on it. But in my wallet, I had a bus pass. Now, for folks who remember, these bus passes back then it was a piece of paper with a hologram on it that you wrote your name and your birth date on it. But I had my official hospital medical card in my wallet as well from Mount Sinai Hospital. So we go down to the precinct. They put us both in two separate rooms, and they start asking us about the night. Well, I knew they asked both of us because they asked me about the night. Things progressed, and they did the same thing. They was like, well, what about the woman? And I'm like, what are you talking about? What woman? I'm telling you, this is what I saw. Now, in the meanwhile, I hear them working on Corey in the next room. And they leave me alone for a while, and I ended up falling asleep. And I woke up, and I was wide awake to the sound of a loud bang. And I was immediately scared to death. I mean, like, every hair on the back of my neck was on edge. And I'm like, damn, the heck is going on? And then I hear Corey yelling, okay, I'll tell you. I'm like, oh, shucks. I don't, you know, like Corey, Corey, if you ever get a chance to talk to Corey about who Corey was back then, Corey was the type of guy that if you was going somewhere, you'd be like, yo, Corey, come with me to watch my back. Because Corey was that dude. He was your ace in the hole. He'd watch your back, you know? So for me to hear Corey yelling in the next room like that, I'm freaking out. I'm scared to death. I'm like, yo, what the heck is this? They tiptoe back into the room that I'm in, and they look at me, and then they say, you're next. So by this point, I'm like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what I'm gonna tell these people. Man, my mom don't even know I'm here. Because in my mind, I'm like, I was going to the precinct to tell them what I saw, and I was going to be home before my mom got back. In the meanwhile, they had already, I don't know if they took Kevin and Corey back to the scene of the crime already, but sometime during that particular night, they took them back to the scene of the crime. Mind you, we didn't have any evidence of any kind of violence that we had done on our clothes. They tell Corey, hey man, your sneaker's untied. So Corey, you know, he bends down to tie his shoe. One of the other officers bumps Corey and tries to make him fall into the scene of the crime so that he can have some evidence on him that wasn't previously there. Mm-hmm. This whole thing was so manufactured. This is something that they wanted us to be guilty of. And I mean, the craziest part about this story too, is as these seasoned detectives were interrogating us, they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that the stories that they were getting from everybody wasn't stories that was matching. So here, I mean, we're talking about guys who've been on the job for 20 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
This is the elite of the elite. These are the guys who you call in to solve crimes. And they're seeing already that none of these stories are matching, but they still went ahead with it. They still pinned this crime on us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you ended up admitting to the crime as well.
I didn't end up admitting to the crime.
No.
You did it.
This is the most interesting story. The most interesting part about this whole story is that after they finished interrogating Corey and they came back and interrogated me again, at one point, I think the Elizabeth Lederer or Linda Fairstein may have called one of the officers out of the room, whispered something to him, and then he looks at me and says, "How old are you?" And I said, "I'm 15. He said, "How come you didn't tell me that SHIT in the first place?" And then threw his notes across the room. Now, in my mind, I'm like, what does that mean? They made a false assumption in thinking because of my height that I was older than I actually was. You know, 2 weeks later, the detective that interrogated me wrote down a so-called statement that he said I made and I gave to him in the DA's office. Now he writes this down in the DA's office under her guidance. You see what I'm saying? My signature's not on it. I'm not on videotape. None of that stuff.
Yeah.
Right, because you're the only one that didn't have a signed statement.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, and I guess your mother interrupted the interrogation at one point?
This is from what I understand. She came and lo and behold, my mom actually found out that I was at the precinct, and she came there and she told them, "Look, you don't have my consent to talk to my son."
Yeah.
You know. And I always tell people too, like one of the most interesting things about this is that we have to understand that even sometimes when parents are in the room, that doesn't necessarily mean that the parent is savvy enough to know that this is a road that they shouldn't be going down.
Yeah.
There should be, in our case, and in all cases afterwards, there should be an advocate that comes in to be an intermediary between us, our parents, and the officers, to make sure that we're giving our fair due and our fair rights. Because at the end, who loses? The biggest losers in the game aren't the police departments of the world, isn't the DA's office, isn't the judges, isn't the mayor. The biggest losers are the taxpayers. Because here 13 years later, the truth came out about our case. It took another, 12 years for our case to be settled with taxpayers' dollars. Mm-hmm. Now that's truly unfortunate. That money should have came from the officers' pension fund, you know, the judges' retirement fund or something like that.
So both of you guys go through this interrogation process. Raymond has a written statement. You do not have a written statement, but both of you get charged for this rape and assault.
Oh yeah.
Now, at this point, there's sort of just like a frenzy happening in New York, mm-hmm. with the public really upset over this happening.
Yeah.
And considering that this is a white woman and a group of black kids, there's almost like an Emmett Till kind of comparison going on at this point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Trump ends up kind of starting the fire in the media.
Oh yeah, he was definitely the fire starter. I mean,
okay,
you know, he did.
What does Trump do?
Well, he did it in the most grandest and most provocative way. You know, paying for ad space in New York City's newspapers, calling really for the reinstatement of the death penalty for our case. Now, mind you, as things progressed, our names, phone numbers, and addresses were also published in the newspapers.
Yeah.
So people started to, you know, call us any time of the day and night. People wrote us nasty letters telling us that they was going to kill us and our families. You know, all of that stuff was going on. And one media personality, I believe he was mentioned in the film The Central Park Five, a guy named Pat Buchanan. He wrote what surmised to be that, you know what, let's take the eldest one, Corey Wise, and hang him from a tree in Central Park. And then let's take the others and horsewhip them. Mm-hmm. You know, so if you think about the whole, first of all, the language that was being used, the idea and the indication of what they were really trying to drum up. And I always say this because if we fast forward to today, the supporters who came out in support of Donald Trump, the people who really thought and think the way that they thought in terms of the viciousness and the anger that they had, that so-called black people and people of color were beginning to advance. You know, when you look at the hatred that came out of the woodwork, the people who uncovered themselves and said, hey, I'm here and I'll beat up people in the rallies, and I'll do anything and everything to make sure that the president becomes Donald Trump. You know, in terms of his whole candidacy, if we were able to look into the future at the future president of these United States, Donald Trump, nobody ever thought in a million years that Donald Trump would be here. But what I'm more afraid of is not Donald Trump himself, but the people who came out in support of Donald Trump. I believe that this same element was present back in 1989. This same element was present back in the Emmett Till case. This same element was present back in the Scottsboro Boys case. And I think it's more relevant to the Central Park 5 case and the Central Park Jogger case, because here we had a situation where our phone numbers, names, and addresses are being published in New York City's newspapers. Donald Trump takes out the full-page ad in 4 of New York City's major newspapers calling for the reinstatement of the death penalty. And people begin to call us. People begin to threaten us. People begin to tell us that we were going to die.
Yeah.
Now imagine if they had their way. They had our address. They could have come into our homes, hung us, drug us from our homes, and hung us from the trees in Central Park. And we would have, this story about the truth and what happened and everything would have never come out in the way that it came out. We'd have been ghosts.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you guys go to trial. It's a separate trial with you two, or no?
No. Both of us went to trial together. It was me,
Okay.
Ray, and Antron. They split it. They split it in half. It was really.
Yeah.
It used to be the Central Park 7. One guy gets off in a way.
It was more than that.
It was more. Yeah, it was.
It should have been Central Park 10 or 12.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. But one guy, you know, he gets out, and then it was left down to 6 people. Raymond, Kevin, Antron, Corey, Kevin, Stephen.
You and Stephen.
Me and Steve, yeah.
Yeah.
And so they split it in half. Me, Antron, and Ray went first.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
we blow
so you
trial.
guys have your trial.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys have your trial. Were you guys offered a plea deal before the trial or no?
We were offered a plea deal. What happened was the lawyers came in during trial and they offered us a plea deal. And at that time, I had about 15 months in, maybe a little less. So I benefited from the plea deal. And they were saying that they was going to try to get us a 2 to 6 year prison sentence. But we all had to agree to do it. And so, you know, Yusef was the first one that said no. And we was like, well, if Yusef said no, we all said no. So we didn't accept the plea deal. And then even after we blew trial, they offered me another deal to testify against Stephen Lopez, who became the 3rd trial that you don't hear about.
Yeah.
And they offered me, you know, they said if I testified against him, they'll drop all my charges and let me go. And I was like, hell no, let Steve win and let him go home.
Yeah.
You know, but he wound up copping out.
Yeah, he got scared because, like, when, you know, the thing about it too is that when we lost, they were already doing a poll because they were trying us as adults.
Yeah.
They said, you know what, we're going to try these young people. The criminals are becoming younger and younger. And this was the beginning of lowering the age, this whole campaign that people are fighting against right now to raise the age back up. This was the beginning of lowering the age, where they were looking at people and saying criminal activity is becoming, is being done by people of younger and younger ages. So we need to charge these youngsters as adults. And so they were taking polls and saying, well, based on the charges that we had been convicted on, each charge carried a maximum of 3 1/3 to 10 years. So I know I think I got charged with maybe 2 major charges. So that meant that had things gone down the way that they wanted to go down, I would have been given 6 2/3 to 20 years for this crime that I didn't commit.
Yeah.
So at that point, we lose. The next trial is beginning, I think, and then Steve says, yo, man, I can't do that time like that. I'm not trying to do that. You know what? Let me just cop out to something that I didn't do, just so that I can get the heck up out of this situation.
Okay, so you guys both blow trial.
Yeah.
How many years do each of you get?
We get 5 to 10 years.
Yeah.
Okay, so the same sentence for both of you.
Yeah, same sentence. Because like Yusuf stated, we were charged as adults, but we were sentenced as juveniles. So you know how California has a 3-strike law? New York doesn't have that. But they do have what's called the predicate and the persistent. And so that set us up for our first felony. If we got another one, then we became a predicate felon. And if you got your third, you became a persistent. So we got our first felony at the age of 14 to 15 years old.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
When you heard the judge give you the sentences, how did you guys feel?
It was unbelievable. Like, here we were, like, we was in, you know, when this case happened, there were about 400 articles written on us within the first 2 weeks of this case, dissecting our lives as 14 and 15-year-old kids, right? And everybody was quick to judge. These guys are guilty. They did it. You know, castrate them,
Yeah.
hang them, put them under the prison system, let the dudes in jail rape them and kill them.
Yeah.
You know, and so now as the case is going along, because it takes about almost a year and a half to get to trial, right? You know, when the DNA evidence comes back, because these guys, the police department took our handprints, right? They took fingerprints,
Everything.
handprints,
Saliva.
footprints, saliva, hair sample, blood sample. They took all of our clothes and they test them against the samples that they have from the crime scene, and none of it matches. So now we go, okay, none of this stuff matches, and we thinking now that people will open their eyes and say, wait a minute, something's wrong here. And a very small percentage did. But majority said, nah, they said they did it, they guilty.
Yeah.
Okay. Now Trisha Millie, is that how you pronounce her name?
Yeah, Trisha Miley.
Trisha Miley. She ends up surviving the attack.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I guess this also, as I'm looking through it now, it also incled sodomy and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah,
All of that
we
stuff.
were-
All of that.
really
We were
bad.
given 13 charges originally. And when we blew on all of them except for attempt murder charge. And then we just got sentenced on the 2 charges, which was rape and robbery.
Yeah.
Okay. So she actually comes into the courtroom and testifies.
Yeah.
But what, she was so badly traumatized that she doesn't remember what happened?
Yeah, they said
Yeah.
due to the injuries that she suffered, she can't remember the events of that night.
She
So-
had total amnesia.
Yeah. So basically, she just really came in and testified based on what she was doing for recovery, and just for the
It was the
jury,
visual- the
the jury
visuals.
could sympathize with her,
Yeah.
and then look at us, because also we had these people in the courtroom who were drawing us every day,
Yeah.
and they was drawing us looking like animals. So this is the visual that you get on TV on the 6 o'clock news when you sit there watching dinner and they talk about our case, and we're in there looking like little monsters.
Yeah.
You guys both go to prison.
Uh-huh.
How many years do each of you end up serving?
6 years, 8 months, almost 7 years.
Both of you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. But you guys are going into prison as rapists.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
And you guys are, well, I mean, you're, you know, Yusuf, you're kind of big, but, you know, Raymond, you're relatively small at this point. You
Yeah.
know,
I was
Rapists is not getting-
about this skinny right here though. back then.
okay. you're just tall and skinny.
Yeah.
But you guys go into the prison system as rapists,
Yep.
which is not respected by
At
other,
all.
other
At all.
inmates.
At all.
You know, especially something as high profile as this.
Yeah.
So, you know, for example, I imagine there's a high level of danger from like the Aryans and stuff like that once you're in there.
Danger from everything, from everybody, even your own kind.
Yeah.
Your own kind is looking at you like, you're not one of us.
That's the worst. You know, people who are there for robbery, that's a badge of honor. I robbed somebody. You there for rape? That's the worst crime you can go to prison for. The only crime that trumps rape is child molestation.
That's right.
And every prison that we went to, every poll that was taken, people were like, "We will take care of them
Yeah.
for the society.
Yeah.
We will get rid of them for you.
Yeah.
We're happy to do it."
Yeah.
You know, best place for a criminal to go is to be in the prison industrial complex so that other more heinous crimes, when those folks come in, those inmates get them, you know?
Okay. Now, you guys end up getting released
Yeah.
years later. Okay. Now, at what point one of you meets Matias Reyes.
Oh, so that's
Corey.
that's Corey Wise.
Corey Wise meets him.
Okay. Oh, cool. Okay, so one of the Central Park Five meets Matias Reyes.
Yeah.
Now, Matias Reyes was someone that was raping women
Yeah.
in New York. The East Side Rapist, I guess.
Yeah,
is what
the
he
East Side
was-
Rapist.
ended up being called.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what exactly happens between Corey and Matias Reyes?
Well, Corey, what happens is that they wind up meeting. They was both on Rikers Island at the same time back in 1989. And what people don't know is that they had a fight over the TV, right? So you fast forward 13 years later, Corey's in Auburn Correctional Facility, and he's walking the yard, what we call spinning the yard in prison. And Reyes sees him, and Reyes says, he recognizes him, and he goes, wait a minute, that's Corey? He's still locked up all these years? And at this time, he sees Corey. Corey, you know, he has bad feet. You know, he just looks like he's having a hard time. And so he reaches out and he goes over and he has a conversation with Corey. But he never tells Corey that he's the one who committed the crime. He just had a genuine conversation with him back from 1989, and he brings up the fight that they have. And Corey tells him, look, man, don't even worry about that. That was 13 years ago. Like, it ain't free none of us. We both in jail.
Yeah.
But he goes on to tell Corey how he has found Jesus Christ, how he's living a different life now. And Corey, you know, comforts him in that. And he goes back to his cell that night and he starts to really think. And he says, damn. He goes and he talks to some of his boys and he says, you know, there's a dude who's in here for a crime that I commit. And I feel bad about it. And they encourage him to go forward. Now because he's going to church every Sunday, he goes down there and he speaks to the chaplain. And he seeks guidance from the chaplain, and the chaplain tells him the same thing. You know, yeah, you need to say something about it if you committed this crime and he's in here because of you.
Yeah.
And the misconception that people think is that this guy just told his story and that was it.
Yeah.
No, he had to literally go through the ranks of telling everybody over and over and over again that he committed this crime. And it went all the way till it got to the Attorney General's office, and they called the DA's office. They called Robert Morgenthau, and they said, hey, you got somebody here saying he committed this crime from 13 years ago. And that's how the investigation started.
Yeah.
Okay, and Matias Reyes, was he doing life in prison, or did he have some long sentence?
He was serving. He's serving 33 and a third to life.
Yeah.
And so during this investigation, it's about an 8-month investigation where the police is investigating the whole thing. And, you know, the funny thing is, like, they don't even feel he's credible. He has to prove to them that he did this crime, right? And so he goes in there and he gives them about 4 cases that's unsolved. And he says, go back and look at those. And they find him and they find out that he's the one that did it. And so, you know, his MO was that he was a loner. His MO was also that he bound and gagged all his victims like this.
Yeah.
And all their injuries were the eyes and the head, the same way that they found the jogger, right? And so when they look back and the DA office writes their report, it's about a 52-page report by Nancy Ryan. And now that report talks about how we're innocent. 52 pages long, you know, and this guy has to prove that he committed this crime over and over again. And then they check the DNA evidence and it matches.
Yeah.
Now, by the time that he admits this, you guys are already out of jail, what, 6 years or so? 6, 7 years?
Except for me, I was still in prison.
Yeah.
Corey was still in prison and I was still in prison.
Yeah, this was one of those situations where I think we had already, those of us who were out, we had done all of our parole time.
Yeah.
And we were basically getting ready to embark on life with the indelible scar of having to tell and explain to people, look, I got convicted of this crime that I didn't commit, you know, but I can't prove it. And it wasn't until he came forward and said that he did it and they matched his DNA with the evidence that they had, that they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that this guy did it.
Yeah.
When you found out that Matias admitted to this and now there's an investigation clearing your names, how did you guys feel about it?
Well, for me, I was in prison, right? I was serving 3.5 to 7 years on the drug charge.
Okay, and hold on, I just want to make a point here.
Okay.
The sentencing that you got for your drug charge was higher than it should be because of your previous conviction.
That's correct. I was a predicate felon now.
Right.
Right. So it fell right under, you know, one more and I'm a persistent. So it fell right under that. And so I was in prison at the time, and I was so institutionalized by this time that I felt they just gonna make this dude the sixth man and they gonna sweep it under the rug and that's it.
Yeah, that's what they tried to do.
And that's what
They tried
to do.
to say this was the guy who they've been looking for all along.
Yeah.
Now, see, the part of the story that didn't match our story, which was perfect, was his retelling of the crime and how he did this particular crime.
Yeah.
How he saw her, he could hear that she was playing music in her ears and she didn't even know he was following her, you know? And then when she made that turn on 102nd Street Traverse, he said he hit her in the head with a tree branch. Now, I always tell people that if we look at TV shows and we see shows like CSI, you know, NCIS, all of these shows, all the alphabet soup of shows that people watch, you know, we know that forensics is an exact science. They can come into a place and they could test blood and say, well, this blood is drier than that blood, so therefore this blood is where something happened first. And true to form, when they look back at their recreation of the crime scene, they knew that she had gotten hit in the head. Something happened at this particular point because they found blood there.
Yeah.
And then they saw the drag, this drag line in the grass. And they knew that somebody had dragged her from the road to that area of the woods. And then when they found her, they couldn't find her keys. And I think her shoes and stuff like that were in opposite directions. This guy had beat her, he raped her, beat her in the head with a brick. And with a rock, and then tried to ask her where did she live because he wanted to go to her house so that he could rob her house. Mm-hmm. And of course, by this time, she's out of it. You know, he throws her keys in one direction, shoes in another direction, and he gets out of there.
Yeah.
Okay. So he gives this testimony over and over again until the point where it starts to stick.
Yeah.
There's an investigation into all this. And at the end of the investigation, you guys are all proven innocent.
That's correct.
Yes.
How did that day feel?
Oh, you know, for me, that was the happiest day of my life. But the crazy part about it is that it was so short-lived because the innocence of us got little to no attention. My mother, I remember she had testified at City Hall. And she was talking about the case, and she said, you know, when they were found to be innocent, you know, that tsunami of media reports that Raymond talked about, that over 400 articles that were being written about us when they thought we were guilty, she said that when we were found to be innocent, it was a whisper that she had wondered if the rats in New York City had even heard.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even to this day, sometimes we go around and we speak, and folks are like, when did you guys come home? We thought y'all were still in jail. I mean, it's like, or there's a complete disconnect, and folks say, man, oh, that's a new rap group, the Central Park 5, CP5. Yeah. The whole history of what happened to us has been almost erased.
Yeah.
You know.
So, did you guys ever get a chance to talk to Matias Reyes yourself?
No.
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 Any interest in doing that at all, or no?
No interest at all. I mean, this guy,
you
know, he was known as the East Side Slasher, the East Side Rapist. He committed about 7 to 8 rapes that they know about. One was a murder of a pregnant woman. I mean, there's nothing to talk about with him.
Yeah.
Yeah, just a horrific individual. Was
Yeah.
he given more time?
No.
Was he given more time?
No, so that's the part that's even the worst part about. That's the tragedy of this story. Huh. The tragedy of the Central Park Jogger case is that the real perpetrator, although he came forward and told the truth, because of statute of limitations, like in New York City is 7 years. If you come after 7 years and tell the truth, or you get found out, you know, because of your MO.
Unless it's murder.
Yeah,
right.
Unless it's murder.
Right. Well, rape is 7 years.
So rape has a statute of limitations.
Yeah,
since he's passed the statute of limitations, he was able to admit it without getting any more time. But he was also, I guess, doing life in prison. So
yeah,
it is what it is.
Yeah, it is what it is.
Right.
So you guys get exonerated of these charges.
Mm-hmm.
I know that years later, the woman who was raped wrote a book about it and came forward. Did you guys ever talk to her?
No.
And
that was the thing too. Like, you know, at first we didn't want to push that because of what she'd been through, and we were sympathetic to it, and she went through a lot. But as years went on, we was like, hold on, like this is a travesty of what happened to her.
Yeah.
But she never wanted to reach out to us, and she never wanted to hear our side of the story. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you know, she also became friends with several of the detectives and the prosecutors. And so these people are sitting here telling you for 13 years that we guilty.
Yep.
Now Reyes comes forward, they still saying we guilty. The DNA matches, he tells you he did it, they still saying we guilty. And, you know, we knew that was difficult, but it got to a point that we was like, but do you ever want to talk to us?
Yeah.
You know, our door has always been open for her to come forward or for us to meet her, but she has never made an effort. So it's like, we're not going to make one either.
Yeah.
But I mean, but the door's open though, so it's not like we're, you know, we've always said, you know what, if she does, I feel like that will be the full circle of us really healing from this whole case. You know?
And to be fair, it's not like she got on the stand and said, Raymond and Yusef raped me. And
right.
You guys should lock him up. She just said, I don't remember.
Yeah.
So it's not like she didn't contribute to your situation, to be fair.
Yeah.
Correct.
To be fair, yeah.
Okay. So you guys end up suing New York.
Yes.
Yes.
Originally for $250 million?
Yes.
That's correct.
What did you guys ultimately get?
41.
Okay.
41.
And that
A
was split-
total.
That was
A
split.
total. Yeah.
41 million total spread across all 5 people.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So about 8
And
million
attorneys.
each.
Well, no, it was sprinkled.
5 and attorneys. Don't
Yeah.
forget the attorneys.
Yeah. It was sprinkled based on the amount of time that we did.
Yeah.
So like Corey got more money than all of us, but you know, 4 out of 5 got about the same amount, and we all had to split that. But we also had to split it with the attorneys and all of that other stuff. They didn't pay for the attorney fees or any of that, you know, which something that they should have done. They didn't give our families any money either.
Yeah.
So even though they went through hell, even though they had to lose their jobs because of the situation that happened, some of them had to leave New York City because of the situation that happened. Mm-hmm. No compensation was given as a result of that to them.
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the day, a couple $1,000,000 each does not match up to what you guys went through.
Yeah.
Correct.
You know, if you were to do it over, I'm sure if someone told you ahead of time, hey, listen, you guys have to go through this, but you'll get a couple $1,000,000 at the end.
Well, see, that's always an unknown as well. I mean, at the end of the day, we've been asked that question in public before. Yeah. And I've always said, and I know Raymond said it too, you know, like, you know, at the end of the day, if somebody told us that the possibility, forget the possibility. If somebody said, look, if you go into the park, you're going to go to jail for years, would you do it? Now, I look at who I am today. I happen to be a motivational speaker. We both go into high schools, colleges, universities, and we speak to young people. I mean, life was hell, but life has took such a tremendous turn towards a positive thing. I mean, Raymond is wearing a shirt that this is his company, Park in Madison, you know? So, I mean, you know, stuff like that. Like, would we be the people that we are today had we not gone through the struggle? Had we not known the intricate details of what it's like to be in the belly of the beast? Maybe, you know? But now we come at life from a completely different angle, full circle, in knowing something that a lot of people don't know. And a lot of people who know about it, they don't want to talk about it because it's one of the most unfortunate realities to talk about, having gone to prison, even if you didn't do the crime, you know, but how did we survive? What did we do? How did we get our lives back?
Yeah.
How are we doing such positive things today?
Yeah.
You know?
Well, after all this happened and you were exonerated and the real rapist admitted to what happened and so forth, there were people that still thought you still did it.
Oh,
I guess
absolutely.
I guess there's theories that even though, you know, the other guy raped her, you guys went in afterwards and raped her as well.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And in fact, I guess Trump felt like that you guys still did it.
Well, see, you know, you gotta look at the facts. And I always say it like this. A person like Donald Trump has the financial wherewithal, especially now. Before he had it, but as the president of the United States, you definitely got it, right? You can know anything and everything, truth or not, at any point in time. So Donald Trump, for him to just kind of stay on the side of wrong, stay on the side of saying, well, you know what, the police officers had so much evidence against them, you know, it's almost as if they're saying, or he's saying, that the police department is infallible. People make mistakes.
Yeah.
It happens all the time. You know? I mean, you got situations where victims of horrific crimes have falsely identified people, and they've come afterwards to be that person's greatest advocate to talk about the fact that witness identification is such a tricky kind of situation. Because when we're going through something like that, we're trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, but things ain't gonna match up that easily. Yeah. But I always talk about the fact that when you look at what I had on that night, that stuff that I had, that article of clothing that I had on that night, to this day has all kinds of holes in it because they went over it with a fine-tooth comb trying to find even a speck of blood to match us to the scene of the crime. Yeah. And so for there not to be even a speck of blood, the victim loses 3/4 of her blood. There's other folks that get assaulted that night. People go to prison for assaulting those other individuals. These individuals who went to prison were picked out of lineups. The assailant knew exactly who assaulted them. Those folks went to jail. None of those folks became known as the Central Park Five. Right. So for that narrative to still be out there, well, these guys got to be guilty of something. You're right. We're guilty of the color of our skin. I mean, that's it.
Now, at any point, did you guys go out of your way to confront the detectives, the judge, the DA, any of the people involved in putting you guys in prison?
Well, we didn't confront them directly. What we did was that we fought back through talking, through telling our story, through social media was a big help for us. I mean, we just uncovered the facts. We uncovered the truth. You know, we went through this civil suit. It took about 11 years to get done. And in that 11 years, we had close to 100 depositions. Now, a lot of that stuff is marked confidential. It will be released at some time in the future, and people will actually get to see. Those who say that we still guilty, those are the ones that's invested from 1989, and they can't let it go. Yeah. The Donald Trumps, the Linda Fairsteins, the letterers. But when you get a hold of these depositions and you start to see the line of questioning that they have been put under, and then you start to see their whole case just fall apart. Like, and we get a chance to sit in those depositions. Yeah. You know, even Commissioner at the time, Ray Kelly, right, who wasn't the commissioner in 1989, but he's commissioner now. And in his depositions, we uncovered so many facts. We uncovered emails between him and Robin Morgenthau, where he's actually trying to take the case. And Robin Morgenthau is telling him, no, y'all dirty. I don't trust y'all. Yeah. And so this was the thing, like, you know, whenever a person gets exonerated and they file a lawsuit, it goes through the court of claims. We were the first case that filed through the federal courts. And the reason why we filed through federal courts is because you get more access to more documents, right? In the court of claims, they can, you know, most likely tell you what they can give you, what they can't give you. When you go through the feds says you got to give up everything. Yeah. And we uncovered so much dirt. I mean, we caught police officers who were corrupted. The officer in my case, who's named Detective Arroyo, he got caught in a sting in Washington Heights, where they found this dead guy, and in the trunk of the car is $30,000, and they split it. The rookie cop turns him in, right? Another cop who we found, who was in Florida, who he came and testified, he was retired, decorated officer, 20 years on the force. Found out that he had a conspiracy case in Florida because he was hired muscle for the mob, right? Then we get the last one, who's Mike Sheehan, who went on to be in movies. He went on to be a reporter for different news stations. This guy was under investigation by the feds because he would go clock into work and he would go hang out at his sister's bar, right? He had numerous DWIs on his jacket, so they was under investigation for stealing company time. Man. And his thing was that one day he's driving drunk, under the influence, and he hits a police horse. Now, none of these guys get reprimanded, right? Because they all came off this big case. Yeah. So they get forced to retire and go live in Florida. And all this stuff gets uncovered in these depositions. And that's the beauty of filing on a federal level. And we was the first case that did that.
Yeah.
Right, the blue wall silence.
Oh, yeah.
Blue wall silence.
Yeah, right. Well, it's a hell of a story, man.
Yeah.
You know, Raymond, Yusuf, I'm really, really sorry that you guys had to go through this. And I think that this really details the holes in the legal system
Yeah.
and what could happen when, you know, you think you're doing the right thing and you're just going along with what the cops are telling you
Yeah.
and so forth. You know, when you look at what's happening in America today, do you think it's much different than what you guys went through?
You know, I think the only thing that's different is the fact that we have video cameras showing the atrocities that go on.
Yeah.
You know, we all knew cases where people got beat up by the cops, never made it to the precinct. People got shot by cops, you know, aren't here to tell the story of that. You know, but then when you see it on camera, you know, I mean, folks whose last words are, "I can't breathe."
Mm-hmm.
You know, folks who, you know, you tell them, "Can I see a license and registration?" And you go back to your vehicle to give them the license and registration, and you get shot down in the process. You know, even this most recent case where, you know, a man was walking back to his vehicle, and the woman said she feared for her life. You know, and so she shot him to death. You know, you know, it's not white folks that are getting shot down, but it's black and brown folks that are getting shot down. You know, the overwhelming majority of people that are in prison are black and brown. You know, and when we look at what brilliant filmmakers like Ava DuVernay has given us, you know, in this film called The 13th, you know, where she talks about the 13th Amendment and how, you know, in this amendment you clearly see that they can turn you back into a slave for the punishment of a crime. And I always say that these words, the words that are being used are key words, and I think it's key words to people of color, because the only people who read that and that word vibrates on a different level are people whose ancestors have been enslaved. So they're telling you right there in the documents of the founding documents of this country, that they can turn you back into a state which they quote unquote abolished, but it's still right there, you know. And then we look at what's going on today. Here we privatizing prisons. We're trying to make sure that some of these prisons are on the stock market. Some of the prisons are using, some of the businesses are using prison labor to put products in stores, you know. And they're paying the prisoners pennies on the dollar. I mean, my greatest pay when I was in prison was 50 cents an hour.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in the top industry. I was in the garment industry.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, stuff like that, when you think about the whole dynamics that go on, you know, I always say that this isn't by chance. This is something that's been by design. Unfortunately, the big difference that happened is that now the blatantness of it all has been institutionalized. So people can, now it's like you got to prove it. You know, if somebody peeing on you and they're telling you it's raining, you know, you're like, nah, come on. Now I got to pull out my own camera and show your own self that you done pulled it out and tried to pee on me. You know, I mean, it's crazy. But it's those types of things that even in a court of law aren't even being upheld. We got clear and like the evidence is right there, and people are still getting a slap on the wrist. We're still the ones that are being shot down.
Mm-hmm.
Had they done to us, I said before, had they done to us what they did to Emmett Till, and we just found out recently that the whole story of Emmett Till was a story that we found out was completely fabricated.
Right. The woman came forward and said that it never even happened. There was
Yeah.
no whistling or whatever.
Yeah, but even that is an atrocity. But if you look back at the video footage from the trial in the Emmett Till case, I remember seeing this with a friend, and I said, "Wow, this is crazy," because they were interviewing some of the jurors, and they said, "Well, tell us about the process that you went through and what happened in this whole case." And the juror said, "Well, we knew we were going to vote innocent to the guys who killed Emmett Till, but we didn't want to come back too quick with a verdict of not guilty, so we had to take a soda pop break just to make sure that we didn't come back too quick with a verdict of not guilty." Now that's unfortunate. That's a travesty all around.
In the words of David Dinkins, that's a damn shame.
That's a damn shame. Yes. Yes.
Well, Raymond and Yusuf, I really appreciate you sharing your story. I think this is something that not enough of our viewers really know about. Because like I said, I think that the initial trial had a huge spotlight on it and the exoneration did not.
Yeah.
So hopefully this is another step and kind of showing the underbelly of what happened in New York. And hopefully this will happen less and less in the future.
Yes,
Definitely.
indeed. That's one of the things that we fight for
Yep.
all the time. You know, trying to make sure that there's never again going to be another Central Park 5.
Yeah.
And even though we're out there talking about it, one of the things that we do, like I said before, in terms of going into the schools and going into the universities, is making sure that this next generation of people who are going to be the lawgivers and law providers, even if you're going to be an officer of the law, you know, you being a sworn citizen to protect and serve is a tremendous job and opportunity, because if you do that, you will be the best officer, hands down. But too few of them are showing their heads. A lot of the bad apples are in the bunch, spoiling the whole thing.
I agree. Raymond Yusef, man, best of luck to both of you.
Hey, well, thank you.
Appreciate it,
Thank you for
man.
doing this as well, man. We appreciate you.